Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning. First of all, I would like to say my greetings to my examiners and my supervisors, the Honorable Professor Dr. Haryanto MPD as my first examiner, the Honorable Dr. Haji Gimnastiti Sakkir SPD MPD as my second examiner, the Honorable Chairil Anwar Korompot MA PhD as my first supervisor, and the Honorable Rian Rehana Sofian SPD MPD as my second supervisor. Thank you very much. I'm Rini Sakkir from English Education Study Program of 2019. On this occasion, I'm going to present my research proposal with the title, The Use of Mind Mapping Technique in Writing Descriptive Text. So my proposal consists of 3 main chapters that I'm going to explain about. The first chapter is introduction, the second chapter is literature review, and the last chapter is research method. To shorten the time, I will start discussing about chapter 1, that is the introduction of my research. This research consists of 4 points, that is the background, problem statements, objective of the research, and significance of the research. Okay, we move to the first point, that is background. Writing is a communication activity in the form of delivering messages or information in writing to other parties using written language as a tool or a medium. In principle, the main function of writing is as a tool in direct communication. Writing helps us to explain our thoughts. Recently, a number of researchers have investigated the form and the purpose of feedback and its impact on students' writing ability. The effects of students' perception is highly dependent on the type of perception provided by the teacher, the abilities of the students, the educational and cultural background of the students, and expectations. Based on the previous research, the researcher found that there was a like research that looked at students' perception after being given English language learning with mind mapping method. With this limitation, the researcher tried to add students' perception as a form of renewal and saw feedback from students who had been given treatment during the research. In this activity, students made essays after they made a grouping of topics provided by a researcher in class. Then researcher corrected errors from students and judged the content, organization, vocabulary, use of language, and mechanical problems. This activity will be carried out 4 times, located at MTSN 2 Makassar. The researcher will conduct a study entitled The Use of Mind Mapping Technique in Writing Descriptive Text. The next point is problem statements. Based on the background that I have been explained before, the researcher formulates the questions of the research. First, how effective is mind mapping technique in improving the writing ability of Year X students at MTSN 2 Makassar? And the second, what are the students' perceptions of the use of mind mapping technique in their English writing class? The third point is objective of the research. Based on the formulation of the problem statements before, the objectives of this research study are first, to find out the effectiveness of mind mapping on English writing skills of Year X students at MTSN 2 Makassar, and the second, to find out students' perception of using mind mapping in learning writing skill. Last of this chapter, there is significance of the research point. From the research result, it is expected to give some benefits. First, theoretical significance. This research will give us references related to the problem and strategies English writing skills students through mind mapping technique. Also, the study provides a favorable description for further research that wants to study the same case. Second, practical significance. First, for the other researchers, the result of the study can be a reference for conducting other research related to this research study. This research can give more information and experience about how to improve the writing skill through mind mapping. The second, for students, this study will be helpful for them in understanding the importance of writing skill to gain more information. Besides, applying mind mapping can increase students' motivation joining writing class. Furthermore, they also become more active in paying attention to the lesson. And for the teachers, this study can be used to understand about the students' writing skill and the way of teaching and learning writing innovatively, therefore that the learning quality will improve. And for the last is for school. The study helps schools to improve learning media using mind mapping technique to improve students' writing skill. Okay, so we go on to the next chapter, that is literature review. This chapter explains about pertinent ideas and conceptual framework. First, there is pertinent ideas. In this part, I will explain about the keywords explanation that are the mind mapping, the writing skills, the descriptive text, and the perceptions. First, there is mind mapping. Mind mapping technique is a strategy for making notes on topic prior to writing, which shows the relationship or ideas. Produce notes at random on paper. Mind maps are a graphic network method of storing, organizing, and reason why it is important is that the teaching strategy includes what are involved actively in learning, how much the students are responsible for learning, and how learning is assessed. The mind mapping has 4 essential characteristics. First, the subject of the attention is crystallized in a central image. Second, the mind themes of the subject radiate from the central image as branches. Third, branches compares a key image or keyword printed on an associated line. Topics of lesser importance are also represented as branches attached to higher level branches. And last, the branches from a connected nodal structure. The way to apply the mind mapping method according to Buzan et 2003 that explain about 5 steps of using mind mapping that are first, you have to use a blank sheet of unlined paper and some colored pens. Make sure that the paper is placed sideways. Next, draw a picture in the middle of the page that sums up your main object. The picture represents your main topic. After that, draw some thick curve, connected lines coming away from the picture in the middle of the page, one for each of the main ideas you have about your subject. The center branches represent your main subtopic. After that, name each of these ideas. Then if you want, draw a little picture of each. This uses both sides of the brain. Words are underlined throughout a mind map. This is because they are keywords and the underlining is in normal notes, shows their importance. And then after each of these ideas, you can draw other connected lines spreading like the branches of a tree and your thought on each of these ideas. These additional branches represent the details. Okay, next there is writing skill. Writing is one of the 4 skills in language. Without writing, we cannot study and know science, culture, and other language. There are some definitions of writing mentioned by some experts. Writing is one of 4 basic language skills, which is considered as the production of graphic symbols to express intention, ideas, feelings, and opinion to be read not only by writer but also by another. A good writing is to express one's ideas correctly and pleasing style. The ideas must be written in clear significance, logical, and coherent sentences. In writing skills, there is types of writing. The types of writing, based from Ramdhani at 2019, divided types of writing in 3 kinds. There are narration, exposition, and description. In narration, the sentences are usually organized according to time order. On things happens and then another things happen, and the events are told in some order. Exposition is a form of writing that explains something. It is often answers to the question of what, how, and why. It is proposed to present ideas and makes the ideas as clear as possible. Description is writing that describes something. If we organized our paragraph of a car by location, we might talk about the material, the exterior, and the underside. The interior would be those areas under the hood, in the passenger compartment, in the trunk, and etc. The exterior would be the front, back sides, and top, while the undersides would include the parts under the body, like wheel and transmission. In writing skills, we also know about the component of writing, based from the Jacob that point out 5 significant components in writing that are content, organization, vocabulary, language use, and mechanics. The next is descriptive text. Descriptive text is a text which says about a person or a thing is like. Its purpose is to describe particular person, place, or thing. Descriptive text often uses the form of be present or past. It is often used in this kind of the text, but sometimes we can also use the past tense to describe a certain thing which is extinct or not available nowadays. The last point is perception. Perception depends on complex functions of the nervous system, but subjectively seems mostly effortless because this processing happens outside of conscious awareness. Perception includes the 5 senses, that is touch, sight, taste, smell, and sound. It also includes what is known as perception, a set of senses involving the ability to detect changes in body position and movements. Okay, next I will explain about the chart of my conceptual framework. The researcher will be investigating about English learning process using mind mapping. Before doing this research, the researcher already doing an observation about the English learning process in MTSN 2 Makassar. In this school, the English learning process is still monotone. The English learning process is not focused in student skill. Also, the media which used in learning English at this school just use the model. For that reason, the researcher thinks that the use of another media is needed to improve the skill of the students. One of the important skills in English learning is writing. Researcher teaches learning to write descriptive text using mind mapping to the students in an investigating way. This is based on observations made aimed at improving students' ability to understand the basic concept of using mind mapping and writing skills. At the end of the study, it is expected to be able to improve students' writing skills. The intended writing ability is based on the appropriate writing component theory. Based on the appropriate writing includes content, organization, vocabulary, language use, and mechanics. The last chapter that I'm going to explain for now is the research method. This chapter deals with research design, population and sample, research variable and operational definitions, research instruments, procedures of collecting data, treatments, and technique of data analysis. First, I will explain about the research design. The approach that the researcher will use in this research is quantitative approach. According to Sugiono et 2007, research data on quantitative approach in the form of numbers and analysis using statistics. In this research, design will pre-experimental research. The researcher will put one group and use pre-test and post-test to see the result of this test. Population and sample. The population of this research is year X students of MTSN 2 Makassar. In MTSN 2 Makassar, there are 12 classes of students with the total of 2,024 students. Second is the sample. In order to get the sample, the study used cluster random sampling. Cluster sampling is very useful when the population is widely scattered. The sample in this research is one class from second year students. The researcher chooses a 5 class. From that class, the researcher chooses 20 students for being the sample of this research. Research variables and operational definition. There are 2 variables in this research. There is dependent variable and independent variable. The dependent variable is students' writing skill of second year of MTSN 2 Makassar. Writing skill is skills to pour ideas into writing, language skills and in writing and compiling sentences so that the readers can easily understand. Meanwhile, the independent variable is using mind mapping technique. Mind mapping technique is a technique that groups ideas from the general to the more specific and more focused. This technique. Next, there is research instruments. In collecting data for this study, the researcher used quantitative approach. The specification of the analysis is quantitative approach. Data obtained by using pre-test, post-test, and questionnaires. First, there is a pre-test. Pre-test will give before a treatment. The researcher give the students some topics. They will make composition based on the topic, minimally 100 words and maximally 150 words. The topics will be examined according to the SI instrument, which contains 5 components of content, organization, vocabulary, language use, and mechanics. Next, there is post-test. Post-test is the final evaluation when the material given on that day is given, which is given in the post-test with the intention of whether the students has understood the material that was just given on that day. The result of these post-tests are compared with the result of the pre-test that have been carried out so that it will be known how far the effect or influence of the teaching that has been carried out. In the addition to knowing which parts of the teaching materials are still not found by most students. Post-test will give after treatment. The researcher give the same test as in pre-test. Next, there is questionnaire. In this study, the questionnaire contains 20 questions related to the student's ability to write using the mind mapping method and how students perceive and the use of mind mapping in writing descriptive text. Next, there is procedure of collecting data. The procedure and data collection will be explained in several stages. There are first, pre-test. Pre-test is the first steps of this research before giving treatment. It is to evaluate students' writing skills. The best will be used in this study is writing test, and the test will consist of 5 choices of them. The second is post-test. After the treatment, the researcher will give a post-test to the students. The content of the post-test will be the same as the pre-test. The purpose of the post-test to determine the result of the treatment. Next, there is treatment. The researcher gives the students treatment by using mind mapping. The treatment will be in 4 meetings and each meeting took 19 minutes. The procedure of the treatment, there are first, the class will complete in 4 meetings by the researcher. The students will be given a pre-test that prepared by the researcher, namely writing test. The researcher used to talk about her findings at each meeting. Second, the researcher gives an overview of the mind mapping. The researcher then go on to explain how to improve writing skill by using mind mapping to interest the students. After that, the researcher asks about the students' interest with the mind mapping. After that, the researcher gave a questionnaire research. Then the researcher explains the definition, purpose of mind mapping, and give an example of create mind mapping. Then the researcher divides students into 2 groups, that is A and B group. And then the researcher gave the mind mapping, the group A and B, and then the researcher gives the questionnaire about the mind mapping. After that, the research asks the student to create mind mapping, and then the researcher gives 10 minutes to ask and answer questionnaire. And last, the researcher asks the students about the mind mapping has given at the several times meeting, and then the researcher will give a post-test to the students. The content of the post-test will be the same of the pre-test. The aim of the post-test is to determine the result of the treatment. The last, there is a technique of data analysis. In this study, the researchers the researcher finds out result of students' writing skill after receiving instruction, especially how to improve writing skill. To analyze the data collected through the text, the writer was using descriptive and inferential statistics to find out the student's writing skill. In writing a good essay, it will view from the 5 components, that is content, organization, vocabulary, language use, and mechanics. Analysis of research data is a very important step in research activities. Correct and precise data analysis will produce correct conclusions. Data analysis is carried out after the data obtained from the sample through the selected instrument and will be used to answer the problem in the study or to test the hypothesis proposed through the presentation of the data. In this study, researchers used quantitative data analysis. The statistic used is t-test. The following requirements are met before the t-test is carried out. There are first, normality test. Normality test is used to determine whether the data population is normally distributed or not. If the analysis uses the parametric method, then the normality requirements must be met. That is, the data comes from a normal distribution. If the data is not normally distributed, or the number of samples is small and the type of data is nominal or ordinal, the method used is non-parametric statistics. The second is hypothesis testing. The hypothesis testing to determine the effect of the discovery method using scaffolding techniques on students' learning outcomes on trigonometry material. Researchers used the t-test. The t-test was used to test the significance of the differences between the two means derived from student learning outcomes during the post-test of the class and the control class. Okay, that's all for my research proposal presentation. I'm sorry if there are any mistakes while I'm presenting my proposal. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.